After years of backpacking, I mean really living out of a single bag and collecting passport stamps like they were trading cards, I've come to a definitive realization. And it's this: the best beach in the world is a myth. It's a phantom we're all chasing. That postcard image we all have ingrained in our minds, you know the one I'm talking about. The one with the impossibly white sand, the ludicrously blue water, and the gentle sway of a perfectly placed palm tree. Oh, it exists. I've stood on its shores, but I've come to understand that it's only one chapter in a much larger, more intricate, and, well, frankly, a more interesting story. What I've discovered is that the true impact of a coastline often has very little to do with that conventional ideal of perfection, right? Sometimes its power lies in its secrets, in its inaccessibility, or even in its imperfections. So today, I want to move past the brochure. I want to take you to 3 coastal landscapes, and I use that term deliberately, that completely dismantled and then rebuilt my entire definition of the word beach. So let's start with that myth, with that flawless postcard image, because to understand the story, you first have to see what everyone is chasing. You know what I mean?
Chapter 1. The Anatomy of Perfection. All right, so our first destination is Australia, in the Whitsunday Islands. A place that is, well, for all intents and purposes, the epicenter of that postcard dream. It's home to Whitehaven Beach. Now, getting there, a bustling backpacker town that always smells faintly of sunscreen and salt. From there, you get on a catamaran, and I remember the feeling of the engines rumbling to life, pulling away from the mainland. You spend a couple of hours just cutting through the turquoise water, the Queensland sun beating down so intensely you feel it on your scalp. You're just sitting there, sweating with sea spray misting your face, watching these lush green islands bride by, each one seemingly more deserted than the last. The anticipation it just builds and builds, Our boat didn't pull right up to the main beach. Instead, our skipper, he anchored the boat and just pointed us towards this short, steep trail through the bush. He just grinned and said, "The lookout's up there, mates. You want to see this first." The air under the trees was thick, hot, and just filled with the sound of cicadas. And then you emerge onto this wooden platform and you just stop. You stop talking. You stop thinking. Below you is Hill Inlet, and it's not a view you can prepare for. It's this impossible, majestic swirl of powder white sand and a dozen shades of blue water all woven together like a marble pattern on a planetary scale. I remember looking around and seeing the same slack-jawed expression on everyone's face. Someone next to me just whispered, "That can't be real." And honestly, that's the perfect summary. From there, we went down to the beach itself. The moment you step off the last patch of scrubby vegetation onto the sand is a physical shock. The air is scorching, but the sand, it's cool. To call it white is an understatement of, almost criminal proportions. It is blindingly, searingly white. We're talking 98.7% pure silica, which is a geological anomaly that gives it some truly bizarre properties. Walking barefoot isn't just a recommendation, it feels like a necessity. The sand is like fine flour, so soft it almost feels like liquid under your feet. And get this, it's so fine and uniform that it squeaks when you walk on it. It's this faint, high-pitched sound, like as if the very ground is complaining under your weight. I spent a good 10 minutes just walking back and forth, just listening to it. The whole scene has this ethereal, almost artificial quality to it. It feels less like a product of natural erosion and more like something an AI would generate if you typed in the prompt, "Render a beach, but make it impossibly perfect." And it wasn't just the visuals. The silence was profound, punctuated only by that strange squeak and the gentle lapping of the water. The true intellectual punch, however, came from the juxtaposition of it all. You see, this beach is a gateway to the Great Barrier Reef. So you have this coastline of almost sterile, monochromatic perfection. And then just meters offshore is this chaotic, vibrant, teeming metropolis of life. You dip your head under the water and you are instantly assaulted by this riot of color and movement. Parrotfish, angelfish. I mean, the entire cast of Finding Nemo is right there. So after spending an hour mesmerized by that sheer, unadulterated perfection on land, diving into the biological chaos of the reef, well, it was a total sensory shock. Whitehaven taught me about the anatomy of perfection, a beauty so absolute it almost feels detached from the messy, organic reality of the world it belongs to.
Chapter 2. The Reward of the Search. But that kind of overt, in-your-face perfection, it leads to an inevitable question. What happens when beauty isn't laid out for you on a silver platter? What if its value is tied directly to the difficulty of finding it? For that, we have to travel to the Philippines. Specifically, the archipelago of El Nido in Palawan. The experience here is not about a single destination, but about the process of discovery. It begins in the town of El Nido itself, which is, wow, just this vibrant, chaotic sensory overload. The air is thick with humidity, the smell of two-stroke engines from the hundreds of tricycles zipping through the narrow streets, mixed with the incredible aroma of garlic and soy sauce from street-side grills. And you spend your days on a banca, one of those distinctive wooden outrigger boats. The sound of its engine is unforgettable. It's this loud, rhythmic, almost agricultural chug-chug-chug-chug sound that becomes the soundtrack to your entire trip. Our days were filled with island hopping. The routine was, well, it was beautiful. We'd chug along, navigating through a maze of monolithic limestone karsts. These things are colossal, ancient towers of rock jutting out vertically out of the emerald water like the ruins of a forgotten city, with little bits of vegetation clinging impossibly to their sheer faces. Then, the boat captain, a quiet, wiry guy named Mateo, who moved around the boat with the easy grace of a cat. He'd cut the engine in some stunning bay. We'd dive off the side, into the warm, incredibly clear water to snorkel. Lunch wasn't in a restaurant. It was right there on the boat. We're talking freshly grilled fish that tasted of smoke in the sea, piles of rice, and oh man, the sweetest mangoes I've ever had in my life, all eaten with our hands while our feet dangled in the water. But I remember one afternoon, after a couple of these stops, a kind of beautiful fatigue had set in. You know that feeling? You're hot, you're salty, you're just happily tired from the sun and the swimming. We were all just lounging on the deck. Mateo had been quiet for a while, just watching the water. Then he cut the engine. Having spent the morning at popular spots, I assumed we were taking another break. But then he pointed. He pointed to what looked like a completely insignificant crack in a towering rock face, barely wide enough for a person to swim through. He just grinned and said, in a quiet, knowing tone, "Secret beach." The way he said it, the tone in his voice told us this was different. We slipped into the water, which was noticeably cooler near the rock wall. You swim towards this narrow crevice, and the sound of the open ocean just dies. It's dark for a few moments, and the rock is smooth and slick with algae under your fingertips. Then, it opens up. We had emerged into a completely enclosed lagoon. It was a perfect circle of limestone cliffs, and at one end
was a small, immaculate strip of white sand, lit by a single shaft of sunlight coming from the opening above. The acoustics of the place were incredible. Every sound, the gentle splash of the water, our own quiet, amazed voices, echoed softly, creating this atmosphere of a natural cathedral. I remember looking at the faces of the other 6 people from the boat, and we all had the same look of pure, childlike wonder. We were all sharing this secret. It wasn't the grand, sweeping panorama of Whitehaven. No, this was intimate. It wasn't the size of the beach that was so impactful, but the feeling of having passed through a barrier to find it. The beauty wasn't just in the place itself, but in the thrill of the search and the profound intimacy of the discovery. It was a beauty that felt earned. You know what I mean?
Conclusion: redefining the destination. So, yeah, we end our journey with 3 very different coastlines. The almost divine, hyper-real perfection of Whitehaven, the intimate, earned secret of a hidden lagoon in El Nido, and the profound, melancholy narrative of Sólheimasandur. Each one, in its own way, could be called beautiful, and yet they share almost nothing in common aesthetically, right? And somewhere along the way, moving between these extremes, it dawned on me that I had started my travels looking for a place, but I had ended up finding a feeling. The search for the best beach, well, I realized it had been a fool's errand from the start, because the premise itself was flawed, you know? It assumes that beauty is this static quality, something that can be measured and ranked, but it's not. It's a dynamic, deeply personal interaction between a person and a place. I mean, it's about what a place does to your perspective. Whitehaven made me question reality. El Nido made me feel like an explorer. Sólheimasandur made me contemplate my own insignificance. None of these experiences are better than the others. They're just different facets of what it means to be moved by a location. It's a realization that has fundamentally changed the way I travel. I no longer chase destinations on a checklist. I chase experiences. I chase that feeling of redefinition. At the end of the day, the place itself, the sand, the water, the rocks, it's all just the backdrop. The real destination is the new perspective you come home with. The postcard is a myth. The journey and the story you find along the way, that's the reality. Thanks for coming along on this one. Keep exploring.
Chapter 3: The Beauty in the Broken. All right, so we've seen perfection and we've seen discovery. For our final chapter, I need you to discard every conventional image of a beach you still have left in your head. Because our last stop takes us to a place that is a beach only in the most technical sense. I mean, a coastline where land meets sea. In every other respect, it's a scene from another planet. We're going to Iceland, to the south coast, to a place called Sólheimasandur. The whole thing begins on Iceland's ring road. You pull into this unceremonious, massive gravel car park, kill the engine, and the first thing that hits you is the sound. Just the sound of a deep, powerful wind, you know? You step out of the car, and the cold is sharp. It stings your cheeks. The experience starts with a walk, a long, bleak, and utterly mesmerizing walk over miles of black volcanic gravel that crunches loudly under your boots with every single step. All you see is a vast, monochromatic expanse under a massive, often slate-gray sky. After an hour, you see it, the skeletal fuselage of a U.S. Navy DC-3 plane that crash-landed here back in the 1970s. It's this ghostly white wreckage, stripped and battered, sitting in the middle of this infinite black desert. I remember running my bare hand over the fuselage. The metal was ice cold and pitted. The wind, it howls through the empty windows, creating this low, mournful whistle. It's a powerful, lonely sight. But after a while, standing there in the wind, you notice something else. Underneath the whistle of the wind, there's a deeper sound, a low, constant rumble that you feel more in your chest than you hear with your ears. It's the ocean. I said, the plane isn't the destination. It's just a landmark on the way. So you keep walking. It's another 15 minutes past the wreck, and with every step, that rumble grows into a roar. The smell of salt finally cuts through the cold, rocky air. And then the flat plain ends. You find yourself at the top of a small sandy bank, and you see it. The North Atlantic. It is one of the most violent and dramatic coastlines I have ever witnessed. There's no gentle slope, no calm turquoise water. The black sand plunges into a churning, chaotic sea. The waves are not the kind you surf on. They are brutal, powerful things that crash onto the shore with a deafening roar, sending explosions of stark white foam surging up the black sand. The contrast is, well, it's breathtaking. The blackest black against the whitest white. You can't get too close. The locals warn you about sneaker waves, these rogue waves that can appear without warning and drag you out into the freezing water. So you just stand there at a respectable distance, and you watch this raw, untamed power. You feel the icy spray on your face. You watch the white foam hiss as it recedes back over the black sand. There is no life here. No birds, no seaweed, no shells. It is a sterile, elemental battleground between land and sea. And standing there, it all clicks into place. You look back and you see the tiny white speck of the plain, and you understand. The beach isn't just the sand. It's this entire hostile ecosystem. The ocean is the immense, indifferent force that has been battering this coastline and that plain for almost 50 years. The beauty here is in the scale, the power, and the profound melancholy of it all. It's a beach that doesn't invite you to relax. It demands your respect and makes you contemplate your own insignificance. It's the final, perfect example of beauty found not in comfort, but in the raw, the broken, and the magnificent truth of nature.